if this were just a box that we had drawn, how are we going to get it to have any dimensional quality at all? So we need to establish, and we had talked about that at one time, we need to establish where the hottest part of the light source is. This is actually lit with multiple light sources, but let's simplify it. So let's say this is the hottest part, that probably is next. As it goes away from the light, it'll get darker. As this gets away from the light, it'll get darker. As this slides underneath the bow, it gets darker. This is the darkest side of the whole image. This is even darker still. Again, this is the lighter of the darker sides, but then it gets darker here. But this would be darker than that. We want also to make sure that we don't create any hard edges. So when we are masking this, we want to make sure our masks are soft, because we have edges that are rolling, right? The edges are not hard edge, but the edges are soft edges. The edge is a little harder here, and it doesn't really show up like it's that hard, but in our vanishing point, it does create hard edges, and we do have hard edges on the top that we have to kind of clean up a little bit. I don't know if they did that. Let's see if they did. So notice how there's let's see, where's the edge? The edge is right here. Notice how, not the best wrap I've ever seen, but notice how it's wrapping around. So it's giving the suggestion that there's a corner that's a soft corner. See how that's kind of rounded? This one isn't right there where it should be. Now, how would you round something? So there's different ways of doing it. The way that might be the easiest way, well, there's two ways of doing it, basically. One is to go in to the filter and to go into liquefy. In liquefy, okay, it's in this empty area, okay. Okay, that here. And I've got to be on that edge there anyway. So if I go into filter liquefy, what it does is it gives me the ability to push something, and I don't want that large of a brush, but let's get that brush smaller. I can go in and push it, and notice how it is distorting the image. So let's go smaller, and I can zoom in here, I think. If I use the right keys, I'll be able to zoom in. So I can go in and push in round corners. Now I'm using just a real delicate brush. Pressure and size, you can play with the pressure and size. The pressure is up at 100%. Maybe you want to initially bring the pressure down so that it takes a little bit more to push it than you would normally. So what you're doing is, it's like the smudge tool. And the smudge tool is another tool that you can use. Smudge tool is like working with charcoal, okay? You're just moving it a little bit. So again, all I'm doing is, all you have to do is just grab and push. So that again, I can do much more than that. Let's see if there's anything over here. Not in that one. Notice that this is like this because I'm only on that one layer. So let's push this a little bit, take that in a little bit. So, nice delicate little push, okay? And it's going to soften that edge a tad because you are blurring that. And so it doesn't blur it quite as bad as a smudge tool, but it does blur it a little bit. But you can see I can kind of distort this thing pretty easily. I just push it and guide it. So that's what you need to do in that top corner. So that's above and beyond shadow structures, okay? So that would be done here. Now, be conscious of where the ribbon is. You don't have to smudge things underneath the ribbon as it's being covered. So, let's double back here. So, the next thing we need to do is start, like I said, let's start looking at shadows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a layer, and you have to figure out how do you want the shadow to react. There's two ways to darken things. One is to darken things and retain tonal value. And that you do with modifying the layer so that's an overlay layer. If you're in an overlay layer, I'm in the wrong one, right? I don't want to do that one. Overlay layer. Okay, so if I go into overlay and I'm using black, and let's grab my brush, and normally I'm working with a brush that's pretty large, and I'm working at a pressure that's maybe about 20%. And let's start looking at this side. I'm not worried about anything right now. I'm just kind of just throwing in shadows. But notice how when I do these shadows, things get darker, but notice how that red, that yellow still has some type of brilliance to it. So I can darken things and still retain tonal purity, okay? It's just a darker version of that same color. And that again is by going into working in overlay. If I don't work in overlay, but I work in gray, just normal, notice what it does. It dulls the color. So I have to be conscious of what I'm trying to do. Am I trying to dull the color? When I dull the color, it will recede. Or am I trying to just darken the color? And that again is an overlay. I tend to, and of course you can also change the opacity once you do it. You can bring the opacity down a little bit so it's not as dark. In this particular case, I'm probably going with the overlay mode in most cases, because I don't want that to get too dull. I want it to still have some brightness. I just want it to be a darker version of it. It might be that I'll do two layers, one with a slight dulling as it gets farther down, farther away from the main part. In other words, what I do is I would go here, and then in this one, just do a little bit of dulling down here, just so that I have a darkness but also dulls a little bit. Okay, so I have both things happening, and I can control those both by opacity. But again, I'm working at, what am I working at, 20%? So it takes a lot for me to do it. So let's go that way with it and see what happens. Now what I need to do is to isolate the area that I want this to be, right? So where is that going to be? That's going to be only in the paper area. I also want to be careful that if it's wrapping around the corner, that it has a soft edge. I also want a little bit of a highlight along this edge, so sometimes a soft edge, when you put two soft edges together, they will naturally let a little bit of a light edge to come through. So let's play and see what happens. So what I'm going to do is, in order to make my mask, it's like every other mask, I'm just going to go into my path, my selection first of all, because that's where John's is. Let's see if John is there. I'm not sure. John is there. Okay, so John is there. So I'm activating John's. I need to do that that John that I expanded, right? Because if I don't, I'm going to have that little gap in there. And then I'm going to go, okay, what else has to be, what do I want is part of that mask? I don't want, I want to be able to eliminate any colors that are on my ribbon. So I need to go into my path and go into my ribbon and make that a selection and then subtract that. So what that's going to do is remove it from the final mask. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the left side. The left side in this particular one has, and I'm not sure how you drew it, I think I drew it the other way the other day. This is now the edge for that I'm going to use to control that edge, and obviously to control the top. So I'm going to go and activate that. That's going to be in a selection again, make that a selection. That's going to be an intersect. But I need that edge to be rounded. I don't want that to be sharp. So what I need to do is make that probably a 20 pixel feather. And what that's going to do is soften that edge. And when I hit intersect, it's going to give me a soft edge. Let's go to the and see how soft it is. You can see the transition is pretty extreme. Let's darken that color so it's 100% so you can actually see what it's doing. Okay, see how soft that edge is? It's not as hard as the other sides. And I need that because I want that edge to be transitional. Let's click that back to selection and go back to my layers and make that a mask. So I'm going to make that a mask by clicking that. Now, I have both of these are the same size, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control key, click on that particular mask, it's going to turn it into a selection. I'm going to go down to this one that doesn't have a selection, and I'm going to create, that doesn't have a mask, but has that new selection. And I'm going to, now both of them are active on that side. So I've got a combination of a little darkening as well as a little desaturating as well as a little darkening. And so what we're trying to do is give that side a light source up here. And now it's possible that if I wanted this to be a little hotter up on top, I could go over, because this is the one that has overlay, I could switch this to white. I'm probably going to pull that down to a 10%, and I'm going to just maybe tickle that just a tad. So what I'm doing is just lightening up that corner. So again, what it's doing is it's lightening up that corner and it's darkening that side. Let's do it without that one. So see what it's doing? It's lightening up that corner and darkening up the other side. If you've got a real light image, you have to be, sometimes that black and overlay doesn't work as well. So sometimes you can only use the black and normal mode at a lighter opacity. Again, you can control the opacity of both of these. As you get the final image, you can start tweaking it a little bit. Let's say I want this one to be a little darker and a little lighter, I can go even stronger. I don't think I ever want to go there, okay? Normally I find that once you do it, you're gonna, it'll look good initially, and then you just have to back it down just a tad. Okay, so you do it till the way it looks, and then back it down, because what's happened, and it happens to me, and it seems like it happens to most people, is when you are first doing it, your evaluation of the end product is confused your mind has adjusted it in a different way. When you take your eye off it and come back to it and pull it back a little bit, it'll fall right into place. Same thing happens with retouching. I'll do a retouch, looks great, I'll automatically pull it back to 75% because I know that that's what it's going to be. I just know that that's the adjustment I need. Okay, so we have darkened that side. Now what we need to do is darken this side. So you're going to do the same thing. And I'm not going to help you with the top. You got to do the top yourself. But you can use this principle, and I'll show you some other stuff too. Okay, so I'm going to go into another layer. I can't do everything for you, right? So another layer. That layer is going to be for this side. And again, I'll probably go and see what it looks like if I go into overlay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that, come on, get bigger. Oh, you can do it. It's really crazy. Sometimes you have to go up here and then out of there, and then it'll get bigger. And I don't know why Photoshop does that. But, okay, so I'm good. It's at 10%. Oh, and I'm in white. That would probably not be what I want on this side. So there's black. So I'm going to bring that down. And I'm just going to play with now darkening this corner. I'm going to do the same thing again. Now let me turn this on and off and see kind of what it's doing. So now again, I'm because the brush is so big, it's kind of washing into the other one. But so I've got to remember that that other one is going to stay as bright as it is. So that's about where I want it, I think. I'm going to go one more layer, and that one I'm just going to dull this corner a little bit more, just so that it's farther away and it's desaturated. So now the same thing again. I'm going to start off with the selection. I'm going to start off with John's selection, so let's load John's selection, because that's the outside of the box, remember? And then I need to start subtracting things. I know that I have to subtract the bow, because I want the bow to be the same color as it was originally, so I'm going to subtract the bow. So that's make that a selection. I have to make sure that I remember to take the 20 out of there and put a 0. Now I'm putting zeros in, and it might be that we'd want to at a later time soften those edges a little bit. It depends. Sometimes it looks good, nice and crisp, and other times it looks like it's cut out. So, but I mean, that's something you can easily do just by double clicking your mask, and it gives you that property to do that. Okay? Whoop, what did I do? I wasn't paying attention. I was talking and not paying attention. So I need to subtract that, right? So I subtracted that from the side of the box. I'm going to go to the right side. Now this is I have to do in 2 steps, because remember, this one does not have the front edge. I purposely drew it farther past the front edge, because now I'm going to trim it with the left edge. But so I'm going to start with this. I'm going to say make a selection of that. I'm going to change this to 20%, or 20 pixels. Again, that's a radius, so it's a 40 pixel transition. I'm going to go intersect, because I want it. Okay, everybody when I say intersect, sometimes I'm just not sure if everybody understands what I'm talking about. What it's doing is it's saying there's an active selection and I have an active path. What an intersect does is it saves the area that both of them share. So in this case, this is shared by the selection, and this is shared by the selection. It is also shared by the path. Okay, that? Okay. So next I need to do is subtract from that the left side, because that's going to give me that corner. I'm going to right-click that, make that a selection, and I'm going to subtract that from the selection because it's hanging out past the point I want it. Okay, so what we have right now is a selection that represents the area that I want to retain the tonal values that I have. So I'm going to OK that, and I'm going to activate the mask. Same as before, I'm going to take this mask, I'm going to hold down the Control key, Command key on the Mac, and I'm going to click on it. It'll automatically make it a selection, and I'm going to come down to here and activate that as a mask. So what I have now, in theory, if it's supposed to work right, we have one side that's darker than the other. I don't know how that looks. It's starting to look okay. And you have this one that's just trimming that a little bit more and dulling that a little bit more. So what we're trying to do is give the box a dimensional quality so that this is receding and this is coming out. We're using shadow structure to do that. Now, we do have this center edge down here that maybe we could throw a highlight on it. So let's be in, I don't know if this is too dark, but we can play with that later. Okay, so if I want to put something down that edge, let's figure out where that edge is. There's that edge right there, right? That's the corner. And I'm going to just go into my pen tool, and I'm going to click on that corner right there, and click down here, so it's a nice straight line, and that's my path, and I'm going to OK that path. And that path represents the vertical highlight line that I want to use, and so we'll see if this works okay. So I'm going to click on this. Let's come back up here. I'll turn all this stuff back on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this path as a stroking tool. So I'm going to go to my brush to figure out what size I want it to be. Probably somewhere around there. And maybe that's a little bit bigger than I want, but let's see what it looks like. And I want it to be white, and I want this layer to be in overlay. So I'm going to click on a new layer. Now, it'd probably be smart for me to name these things, but right now I'm not going to. So I'm going to stroke this and see what it looks like. So I have to make sure that that is white. We're in a brush. The brush is a soft brush, right? Soft brush. And we're at 10%, so we'll see. Maybe I'll have to stroke it a few times, but let's see what it does. So I'm going to go into my path, go into, I can right-click this and do it this way. I'm going to say stroke path, and I'm going to stroke it with my brush. Notice I can stroke it with all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I could do it with the smudge tool, blur tool, all kinds of things, right? Healing brush, all kinds of things. So let's just OK that and see what it does. Yeah, a little bit of a highlight. Did you see that happen? Let's do that one more time. So I can do that right down here too, so I'm going to click it one more time to make it a little brighter. Probably a little bit too bright, but remember I have an adjustment. I can control that, that's no problem. I also don't want it to be that intensity all the way down. I want it to dissipate as it goes down. So what I'm going to do is, and that might be wider than what I really want it to be, but I just wanted it wide enough so you could see it. Let's pull that back just a tad. And again, I think it's probably a little bit too wide. And let's turn that on and off so you can see it. Okay, I don't want it down here. I only want it at the top. So I'm going to throw a mask on it. And in that mask, I'm going to go black over here and get a nice big brush. And it's at 10%. I'm just going to click it a couple times just to make sure. And I'm going to big brush so that it gradually dulls that a little bit. Okay, so I think that's about where I want it. So maybe a little bit more. So what it's doing is it's giving me a little bit of a highlight down that. I don't think I like it, but it's like I said, it's too wide, but we'll just leave it the way it is. Maybe I'll pull it back just a tad. How's that look? Any better? Can't see it now at all, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's better. Okay. Okay, so we would do the same thing on the top edge. Along here and along here. So what I do is I do a path that would start here. Let me go with that big circle's driving me crazy. We'd start the path here, go to the center, and then out to here, stroke it, and then fade out the edges so that it's really strongest here and then duller here. Because remember, we have to remember that we do have a highlight hit right here and there. So we have the logical reason to have a highlight on that ribbon, or on that cloth. Okay? And I'd probably go, this is probably about the width that I would probably go, not the width that I went to. Okay? The other thing that we need to do is we need to look at, there's a ribbon, let me hold this down and click on this. There's a shadow right here. And that shadow is because the ribbon is just above, the ribbon is just above the paper. And that shadow has a little bit softer hit. This one has a little bit harder hit, but is closer in. It isn't as, it's there, it's almost like a slight drop shadow. This one is, over here, it gets almost that wide. Over here, it's a little less. So let's look at what we can do with that. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to open up a new layer. Let me click on this to get us back to here. Come on, be nice. It's not. Okay. That's what happens when you click on things. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to do another stroke, because I'm going to use the same type of logic that I used for the highlight. I'm going to go into my pen tool. I'm going to go just underneath this ribbon, and I'm going to, for right now, just come straight down. Straight down. So what I have now is just this path that goes all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to, that's the highlight, right? Okay, that's what happens when you don't label things, right? Okay, so here's my, is that the highlight? Where is the highlight? Did I lose the highlight? I don't know what it's saying. Okay, we'll go here. This is going to be the shadow. Right side shadow, right shadow. Okay. Right shadow, right shadow. Okay. And interesting. Cap lock must have been on, right? Okay, right shadow. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that at normal, because I want this to be a shadow. And I'm going to get my brush down a little bit, because that brush was just too extreme. So let's let me get this back to where it should be. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go here to my brush. Let's see how big my brush is. It is a big monster brush, right? So let's go cap lock, bring it down to what I want it to be. So what I want it to be is something about that wide. I'm only looking at the one side of it. The other side is going to be underneath the ribbon. So I'm going to look at that about there for right now. It's at 10%. I'm going to make it 30%. It's black. And so I'm going to just stroke it. So that would be path and stroke it. And let's stroke it again. let's stroke it again, make it nice and dark so you can see it. Everybody see that? Let me hide some stuff so that you can see it better. So I'm gonna go back over here and shut this stuff off so you can see it better. So what I did was I just drew a path and then I threw a dark shadow. Obviously the dark shadow's over top of the bow. I don't want that, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw a mask on it. So again, what I'm gonna do is go into John, say, John, I need your help a little bit here, so I'm gonna load John again, because that'll help me down at the bottom. So let's go John, and activate that. And then I'm going to go into my paths and remove from it the ribbon. So I'm going to subtract the ribbon. And I'm going to say, let's make a mask out of that. So I'm going to go layers and make a mask out of that. So what that did was, notice I still have my shadow, but the shadow is only on the paper side of the ribbon. It's not on the other side because this is, I gotta make sure that that black is black. Okay. It's not, so if I click this on and off, it is darkening that. Why is it, do I have a feather on that? I bet I do. So let me go and replace that. I think I have a feather on it. Sorry about that. Let me delete that. Make sure this is black. Okay. I think I had a feather on that. So let's do that one more time. So we're going to do select, load selection, load John, go to my path that has the bow, right click that and make that a selection and make sure that isn't a 20 but a 0. I can make it a 1 probably, just to get a little bit softer edge. And I'm going to subtract it. Then I'm going to go into my layer and I'm going to make that a mask. So again, that looks a little bit better, right? Problem is that it is consistently the same distance from the edge, right? All the way down is the same distance. However, the ribbon is touching spots and not it's not quite touching, is closer in some areas than other areas. So how can I modify this so that it conforms to the ribbon? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go to the little knot that is resident in the in that mask structure. Okay, do you see what I'm clicking on and off right here? I want to distort this, but I don't want to distort that. If that's knotted, that's going to distort with it, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm disconnecting the knot. I'm going to go into here and go into, well, I could go into, let's try it this way. I'm going to go into smudge, and let's use a nice big smudge. So I could go into liquify too, and I'm going to just push this in a little bit. Push this in a little bit over here, and push it in over here because I don't want it to, that's where the paper is touching the ribbon. I don't want that to happen. So what I did was, I just gave that an irregular line. So this is out farther and this is in tighter. So it kind of conforms to the way the ribbon is being picked up. The other thing that I can do is that I can go to the ribbon and I can go to the move tool, and now I can move that, oops, would help if I were grabbing the right thing. I'm grabbing that shadow, and why is it doing that? There. Because it's auto select, which is Drives me crazy. There we go. Shut the auto select off. You don't need auto select. So now I can actually move that shadow. Notice that shadow. I can move that shadow in and out so that I can kind of position it in reference to that ribbon in a way that's going to satisfy the way I want that to look. Now, because I'm noticing that when I clicked on the shadows here, let's see, that's, oh, that's, why is it there? Okay. Interesting. Okay. Oh, that's fine. What I noticed here is that side was getting way too dark. So all I have to do is pull that opacity back. Remember, I pulled that other one back a ways. So I'm going to pull this one a ways back too, so it's not as dark. And then that shadow where the ribbon is going to be more obvious. So I'm starting to add things to make this look dimensional. Same thing here, and I'll just do this quickly so that you get, and you would be doing the same thing up here. I'm just not going to do it, I'm just going to do the sides. I'm going to click on this and then go again, get my pen tool, go from top to bottom, stroke it with the brush that I want. Let's see, my brush is, I'm going to get my brush a little tighter this time. I'm going to get it about there because that brush is really small. That shadow is really small. And I'm going to just, I'm in there, in that one, so I'm going to just click it, go into my pass. I can right click this. It's a working pass, so I need to make sure that I save it. I'm going to right click that, stroke the path, and with the brush, and you'll notice that it stroked it down. Now I probably want to go hit it again, so I'm going to just stroke it one more time just to get a little bit more density. Again, what I need to do is deactivate that. I have a line that's sitting on top of my ribbon. I'm going to do the same thing again. You bother John a lot with this project. Okay, so you're going to go to John, because John controls that edge, right? And so now I'm going to go to the ribbon again, I'm going to select that ribbon, make sure it's a one pixel feather, that's okay, subtract it, and then make that mask. Okay, everybody following what I'm doing? Okay, now that, you notice how that has that edge? Now I probably just need to, I'd probably tweak it in a few spots. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the arrow keys, and I'm going to slide this to the move tool. Hit the letter V, does the same thing, and I'm just going to slide that under it a little bit so that it's just a little less obvious. And, you can play with that and see how it looks with your particular piece. Okay, so all of a sudden those sides are starting to look like they have something. Okay. We had talked about the ribbon, and there are multiple ways of doing the ribbon, but we're going to do it a way that some of you have done it before. And let me see if I can remember the order right. It's been a while. I'm going to isolate the ribbon with a selection. So that means I need to create a mask. And so the mask has to be, again, John's going to give us the outer edge. And we're going to need to go into our pass, go into our ribbon or our bow, right click that, make that a selection. I'm going to probably keep it as a one pixel feather, let it bleed over the edge a tad, and I'm going to intersect that because I want the what I want is the ribbon. So that is the ribbon. Now the ribbon is selected. I'm going to go to this layer and I'm going to make a mask of that. Now I'm also so I'm going to go Control J on that a couple times. Control J duplicates it, so that gets it up to the, well, I'll be back out of there a little bit, not do that quite yet. No, okay, let's go down here.
What duplicates it? Control J?
Control J duplicates it, yeah. But I'm not going to do that yet. I got to pull that back down because I need to change a couple things. I need that probably, so the opacity of that is going to probably be about 40%, 45%. So I know that for sure. So I did that rather than having to do that on each one. So now I'm Control J, Control J. I probably need an adjustment layer underneath. So I'm going to click on this, hold down the Control key and click on it, and I'm going to go to the layer below it, and now activate an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go into curves. So what I have now is a curves adjustment that isn't adjusting anything, and it's then I have 3 layers directly above it. The layer underneath, I want to put that in multiply. The next layer I want to put in overlay, and the next layer I want to put in color. Okay, so let's just back this up. This one I'm going to possibly put this in either multiply or into what's the other one? Multiply or screen, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to see what it looks like. Okay, so what this is, this little block of stuff right here is the way that you colorize objects that are already a color. So what I'm going to do is modify that color. So what I have to do now is pick a color. So let's go grab a brush here. There's my paintbrush. Let's hold down the Alt key and pick that color right there. Okay? I don't know, as good as any. And I'm going to go over here and say Alt Delete. Go here, say Alt Delete. I know what I needed to do first, but I have to do that yet. And Alt Delete. Okay. So there was something that I didn't do because right now it's being influenced by that yellow. What I need to do before all this is I need to do a layer that is neutralizing that color underneath. So what I need to do is I'm going to go and let's see if I can drag this, put that there, and now I think I'm going to do it this way. There we go. How do I want to do this? I'm going to go in here, and there's different ways of doing it, but I'm going to try to do it this way. I'm going to click on this to make it a selection. I'm going to go in down here in this on our ribbon down at the bottom, and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to go here, open up a new layer, and paste it there. So what I have right now is a ribbon that's yellow. I need that ribbon to be neutral, so what I'm going to do is go into Image, Adjustments, and make that Image Adjustments, and make that black and white. So there we go. Okay. So what that allowed me to do is to neutralize that yellow ribbon so that it was gray. And now I have these here. The ribbon is now that blue. Now, I might want to tweak the highlights a little bit. So what I can do here is let's try this, and I'm not. Sometimes you go one way, and sometimes you go another way. I'm going to try screen, and that brightened it up. And I'm going to push this in and push this in. So what I'm doing is just tweaking my colors just a little bit so that my shadow structures are a little stronger. I just brightened it up a little bit. I can pull it back just a tad. And so now if I want these highlights to be a little hotter still, what I would do is go up to a layer above that. I'm going to again, yeah, I'll do it this way. I'm going to go again, I'm going to go Control key and grab another mask, another selection of that ribbon, and I'm going to make it a mask. I'm going to make this layer overlay. Boy, this is a lot of stuff, right? Okay, so I'll kind of walk through it again. So this little clump of stuff that I've got here for the color, what I did was I neutralized the color so that it wouldn't come through. I mean, I could, that's kind of an interesting green, but I neutralized that. I modified it with an adjustment layer, a curves layer in screen. Now sometimes I'll do it in multiply. What that does is darken it, and then you work the other way. But I usually don't like that with this dark. Maybe that's working. What do you think? Not much difference there. Gives me a better blacks, I think. Then what I'm going to do is I want to highlight my the reflections a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into white, click white, get my brush, get it a little bit bigger so that it can work. I'm at 30%, probably go 20%, and I'm just going to play with, it's in, let's see, this in overlay, okay. So what I'm going to do is, let me go hotter. So you can, no, I don't like it that hot. 30%. So what I'm doing is just going over my highlights a little bit. And let's see if it's really doing anything or it's my imagination, right? There it goes. See how it's getting a little brighter? And I'm just going to go in and catch my highlights just a tad. Because I want it still to be blue. I don't want it to, because remember the highlights weren't white, they were yellow. This is a blue ribbon, so I want it still to be blue. So I'm just going to go in and just tickle them a little bit. If I just wish it could be a little bit more, what I might do is Control J and brighten it up a little bit more. That's a double hit for the ribbon. So I think that's probably too much. Okay? Is that enough? So let's just go over the shadows. So the shadows you're putting in, you're going to play with whether or not it's going to be an overlay shadow or a normal shadow. The normal shadow, when you were painted black, will dull it. The overlay shadow darkens it. So you'll have to look at what your specific pattern prefers. Because sometimes a lighter one might work better with one or the other. Okay? You're going to then use your masking to trim the edges, and then your masking also to isolate your so that you're not darkening the bow or making the bow, giving additional shadow structure to the bow, which you don't want to do. In reference to the color, you can pick any color here. Let's pick a different color. Once you establish what this is, You could just change this color just by going Alt Delete, Alt Delete, Alt Delete. That a better color. That's pretty bright. But maybe that's the color. Okay? So once you establish the masking structure for the color, and you also have, and write down what the layers are. The bottom layer is multiply, the next layer is overlay, and the top layer is color. All of them are at an opacity, and you can play with an opacity too. Let's just do that a little bit. I might bring the opacity down a little bit because I want it to maybe not scream that color so much. So I want to pull it down to a lower opacity. And what that's going to do is give you a color that's maybe not going to scream at you as much. Okay? Do I want some of that yellow to come through? Maybe I'm going to pull some of that grayscale away and let some of that yellow come through. Because I think that's a nice tonal range. Okay? Think you can do it? It's again just using masks to isolate your shadows. It's just using masks to isolate where that ribbon shadow is, making sure that you disconnect the knot between the ribbon shadow and the ribbon so that you can slide that shadow in and out. And that way you can customize it a little bit. You disconnect it also so you can distort that straight line so that it wobbles based upon where the ribbon is touching. And highlights are just as important as shadows. So remember that you can add a highlight by going into overlay and paint white. So, you might want to brighten this area up on here. Make sure that you are using the key thing with everything in the shadow structure is that you're using, this is the reference, especially on top. The top is telling you exactly where you need your shadows. There's your hot spot right there. You even have a little bit of reflection of the bow there, but you have a double shadow here, and look at how hard that edge is. So there's a hard edge shadow here that dissipates as it gets to the edge, because that's where the paper is touching. There's no shadow there at all, but it starts to get wider and wider until that ribbon starts peeling up. Then you get this secondary shadow, which is a soft shadow from that fill light. Over here, you have a rather dark shadow right here that has a pretty decent edge structure. And then you have a soft shadow that's here, which is really darkening up that edge. You do have that shadow that goes underneath this fold, and you have a darkness back here. That ribbon could still get hit a little hotter, I think, those highlights. I'm not happy with those highlights.
Does the ribbon have to change completely from yellow, or can it just be a much lighter shade?
It just has to be a different color.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go hard light. No, hard light makes it blue. Interesting. Pin light. No, where's the blue coming from? Interesting. Where's that blue coming from? Was I painting in blue?
Before,
Huh?
the color you did was a bit bluish before, so maybe that's affecting that.
Yeah, let me do something here. Yeah, maybe I was, because it just wasn't giving me the highlight that I would want. Let me go here, do this, go here, Alt delete. Oh, yeah, I was painting in blue. That's why it was not working right. Okay, so let's just go here, select all this, and delete that. And let's do it the right way. See what it turns out. Okay, deactivate that selection. And we got white now. Let's see what it does in white. That's better. That's what I was looking for. There we go. Life is normal again. Wondering why it wasn't getting bright. But that is so much better now. This has to be brightened up. This has to be brightened up. Now, I've purposely put the mask on here so that if I paint out here, I don't do anything. So that's probably something that you should be conscious of. Okay, so that's doing what we want to do. So let's turn that off and on. That look better. There is a brightly lit. Now the nice thing with overlay in white, it's not going to make the highlight white. It's going to keep it green. Unless you really pound on it, then it might. But typically, it just brightens it up. Okay. And you're going to need. Okay. The thing that what we're going to do is this needs to be handed in as a image next week. What we'll do is we'll look at your images. We'll evaluate if there's any corrections that I would suggest, and then you will print it the following week. Okay, so you'll have some tweaking time, and I'll use a kind of a combination grade for the end grade. I'll grade the image as it was turned in, but I'll also grade the end print, because that's what the client gets. The other thing that I need to bring up now is what our next assignment is, because we're going to start talking about that. We're really not going to work on the package next week. We're just going to turn it in at the beginning of class. And then we'll talk about it, and then we'll have the rest of the time to talk about the next assignment. So I need you to be prepared to work on something in class next week, or to show me some samples of the direction you want to go. So if you can grab one of each one of these and pack that way. Okay, so what we're doing is we're doing the international poster next. So we're taking you out of this anal kind of thing that we're doing right now, right? Which is, you know, is tight and doesn't have any loose ends at all. And what we're doing is that we're going, oh, let's see if I can go there. Okay. What we're going in next is we're going into a competition that is being put on by the international organization at school. They do a international agenda. It's I wonder how many times it's printed a year. I'm not sure. But anyway, they have a competition that they do every year. And so let's see if I can find the competition. Was that it there? There it is right there. Students. Okay. So you are getting the larger version of it. This competition is something that we participate in every semester. It's the advanced Photoshop classes. Both of you will compete within this competition. The winner for the last maybe 6, 7 out of the last 8 times has become from this class, from either one of your classes, okay, the Photoshop 2 classes. So we have, and we're competing against the fine art department too. So sometimes we have a first and a second, but it's up to you to make sure that happens, right? So what is involved in here is a poster that deals with issues that are international in nature. If we go out in the hall, you'll see some of them. I'll try to bring examples, additional examples next week. I'll bring a box over from my office. Normally I would go back and grab it. So let's go out in the hall and we can look at which ones were international. Thank you. So you can see kind of the feel of them. Okay, so this one was one of the competition. I'm not sure. I think it may have been the second place. These two. I think we talked about last week is we had one that showed the students' impression of Mexico that they know that their family has experienced in Mexico that the tourists see. So there was the violence on the one poster and mariachi bands in the other. Okay, because her family was from a border town that was influenced that way. We've had those girls that were kidnapped. There was one on that one. There was one on slaves. What's it called? Slave trade within the United States as well as internationally. And so the students have picked some rather, significant subjects, and they're looking for that type of thing. What they are also looking for is, and we've had a couple winners that were just basically travel posters. In other words, that showed, Netherlands or showed England, or there was one that was just a flag, the British flag with significant sites that were shown through it. So you don't need to necessarily go to political or emotional upheaval that we're experiencing, but you could go to more of a casual side if you wish to do that. But I think there's enough things going on now that you should probably have a pretty good choice. You just have to pick a country and go, okay, what's going on there? You know, are you talking about, there was one on the Croatian issue. There was one on all the people leaving some of the Middle Eastern countries and coming across the water. All those shots of those little kids that were, you know, that had died in the water. There was one that dealt with that. So there's a lot of different subjects that you can go to. You know, the French and their new president, and how he's dealing with the conflicts within his country. So I think what you need to do is just to do some research on what it is, what you feel might be an appropriate subject matter, and then start gathering imagery that might relate to it. Now, you know, there's a lot of people that say you should be using your own imagery, but I think that's kind of impractical in certain choices. You know, you're not going to go and fly over to Europe to get some shots. So, if you are using shots that other people have taken, you always want to make reference. You always want to keep track of where those came from, because those are owned by different news organizations, and so you have to be careful with those. At least make sure that you are tracking those and being aware of where every shot came from. Okay? If you can buy the rights to use them, then you have a higher chance of you putting it into your portfolio. Now let's back up a little bit. Writers, they have a software program, so if you use any of their photos and you put it into your website, let's say you did something and you put a picture that you did, that you took one of those shots that they had, and you drop it into your website. They have software out there that will search for it and find it. I had a friend that he got a bill for $20,000. And it was on a website that he didn't have time to finish, so he gave to somebody else to finish for him. They grabbed a photo off the internet and dropped it into the website. And they tracked him down and said, you didn't buy the rights for it. And it was used for, the website was a large corporation, and so those are ones that usually attract the interest the most, right? When I worked for AT&T, everything I used, I found the rights and bought the rights for. Even the Sistine Chapel. I had that in one of my productions, and I bought the rights to use it. And in Europe, it's the family owns the rights. It's a strange little connection. And which was strange because I had have a friend come over, and her dad was born in Italy, so he was our go-between, because they only spoke Italian, and he's talking about the weather, and he's going, oh yeah, I'm from this part, she's translating what he's saying, and we're going, can you get to the part where we're buying the rights for the photo? And well, you have to kind of lay the groundwork. You have to do it the Italian way. Okay, so if you find an image and you can, get the rights to use it, that would be the best way to make sure that you put it in your portfolio. Or if you have a website, put your portfolio, tuck your portfolio into your website and your images in. So be sensitive to those issues. And it's not necessarily how much you've modified it, because their stuff is pretty sophisticated. Obviously, Disney has stuff that's even more critical. They'll track you down if you were using it for a one-time purpose, and it was, you were, little grandma Susie, and she used it for some reason. They'll track her down and have her pay for it. They're really vicious, okay? So be careful about that. But what I want you to do next week is to start doing your research. The poster isn't due until later, it's not due until the 13th. We're not going to take that long to work on it. We're going to take about 3 weeks to work on it, maybe 2 weeks. We'll evaluate how that is. But what we'll do is we'll kind of revisit it. We'll get it as the quality that we can get it, and then we'll kind of let it sit there for a while, and then again look at it again just before you turn it in. I have to basically sign off on everything, so I think on the form there's a spot for me to sign, I think. I'm not sure, but what we'll do is we'll revisit it probably 2 weeks before we turn them in. And that way, sometimes when you set things down and then you re-evaluate them, you can see them you can see a little bit more and be a little bit more critical of them. So we're looking for some winners. You guys will also, what I'll do is I'll take your stuff and show it to the Thursday class, and the Thursday class stuff I'll show to you. And you're going to critique their stuff and they're going to critique yours, so that we can get feedback from the two classes back and forth, because they're really competing against you, right? It's what class is going to get the winner out of it. Okay, any questions about what, so the package is due next week as an image. And what we need to do is now make sure that what I showed you, you feel comfortable with. So start doing your shadows so that you feel comfortable with what you're doing. And then if there's any questions, we can revisit things, okay?
So when you say like the package is due as an image, you mean like, does it have to be like a JPEG?
No, it has to be a Photoshop file, the finished production file,
Okay.
okay? So it has to be the finished production file. And then from that finished production file, you're going to print that the following week, so that you'll have a print. Because sometimes the file has to be modified to get a good quality print.
Right.
Because sometimes, based upon where you're printing it, you're not going to go to Kinko's, because they do nasty, nasty stuff. But there are places to get it printed. You just have to make sure that you see what your image is, because the first time you send it to them, you're going to find that it doesn't look right. You're going to have to tweak your image for their printer. Okay, it's what we call a filter pack for that particular printer. That printer might print too dark. That printer might print darker than what your monitor is seeing, or it might print lighter than your monitor. So then what you do is you adjust the image. Now on your screen it might look horrible, but on their printer it might be great. Okay? Maybe they have a cyan shift, and so you have to put a magenta shift in your image so that when they print it, it cancels it out and gives you the proper colors. Okay? The print is sometimes the most difficult thing to get, because there's the most variables going on there. Also, you're losing, anytime you duplicate something to a different medium, you're going from a screen-based backlit image to a print. Now you're going to print it on glossy, high glossy stock, so that it's as bright as it possibly could get. But it's still going to lose some of the intensity that your screen has, because it can't possibly match. Okay? Ideally, you'd want to go to a printer that might be an RGB printer. But it might be that the CYMK printer, based upon the colors, you might get a color shift, but the color shift is okay. Because remember, a CYMK printer is only printing 9,000 colors. An RGB printer is printing more. Now, so we'll have, so I need you to understand that the week after next, when you're getting it printed, don't get it printed Tuesday. Print it like Friday, so that you have time to evaluate it. Also, make sure that the printers are giving you what you perceive as correct. I mean, they might be screwing up, their printer might be screwing up everything, so you don't pay for something that they mess up.
So you want us to go to like a print shop here?
Well, I want you to go, I mean, you don't have to go to a print shop. You can go to Express Photo. They do some nice stuff. They're on Newburgh, well, it's just a little east of Newburgh and 6 Mile. And they give students a discount. I think the print is like $2 for 8 by 10. Walmart sometimes gives you some decent stuff. Costco has a nice printing capability. If you're a member of Costco or know that somebody is,
Yeah,
they have some nice quality printing. Okay.
Walmart too?
Walmart, I've known people go to Walmart and get great prints. You just don't want to, if you're paying about $1.50 to $2.50 for a print. If anybody's charging more than that, they're ripping you off. Okay. What is it? Office Depot or Office Max, the one over here.
Office Depot.
Which is the one over on
Office
8
Max.
Mile is the bigger one. I've worked with them and they do some nice work too. And they have the one over here on 6 Mile is small. The one on 8 Mile is larger and they have more capability. But again, you could also, if you've got a printer of your own, try that. Make sure you do it on glossy stock though. Nice. Now I found that if you have an Epson, you always want Epson paper. Other than that, Epson for some reason produces a better image on Epson paper than any other paper.
What do you feel about the photo printers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be good too. Because if a photo printer, and what kind of inks does it?
It has like, they can, 10 different inks.
Yeah, that's ideal.
Okay.
Yeah, because that'll have the red, green, blues in it.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more ink, and when inks cost more. I had one of those, and I went, if I need something quality, I'm just going to go out and have it done. I'm just going to use my Epson RGB or CYMK for regular jobs and good jobs. I'm going to go out and get it done. I'll send it to Costco. And I find that sometimes it's more cost effective. Because you figure the ink and the paper, sometimes your printer is going to cost you $1.50 anyway, or $2 for print. But then you have the ability to control, immediately control. Okay, any questions? Okay, if you want to take a little break, do that, and then start working on your images. And if you have any questions, we can deal with them. If you have any trouble with doing the shadows, you can deal with them. Any question in reference to the contest?
It doesn't exclude the United States, does it?
Well, I think if it's United States, they would like to have some international connection to it. Okay? And I haven't, the reality is I've never seen anything from the United States as a winner. So I don't need, and I've seen some nice quality stuff, and they always seem to go to the international ones, and that may be, the reason why. Okay.
You said for next week, all we do is start researching our topic and images.
Yeah, what you need to do, from today on, just start figuring out what you want to do, and start researching.
remember, research is gotta be the first 40% of, if not 50% of what you do. Okay? 50% of your production time should be research. And once you do the research, then you're going to be finalizing and refining. Okay? Okay, so take a break, 10-minute break, and then start pushing colors around. Yep. Oh, okay, way back then. Go to, let's go to the Thursday class.